Hey everybody, it's Josie here. I am going to do my wrap up for this year's Contemporary-A-Thon. So the Contemporary-A-Thon ran from the 17th to the 23rd of September. The idea really is to read 7 books in 7 days. Now I know myself, I know that life, work, blah blah blah, I won't be able to finish 7 books in 7 days as much as I'd like to. So what I ended up doing was I ended up picking 5 books and doubling up on a couple of the challenges where they fit. And I knew I was going to manage all 5 books over the week, so that was good, and I did. I managed to read them all. And also, a couple of these were on my TBR, so that was really good. I kind of got a bit of a TBR relief on the Contemporary-A-Thon as well. So without further ado, I am going to read the challenges and then tell you what I read and give you my thoughts on it. So the first challenge was to read a contemporary with orange on the cover. Now, oddly, I seem to have quite a few books with orange on the cover, and actually the one that would have been amazing for this challenge is The Animators. It's an all orange cover. Love that book so much, but I've just read it. I don't know if I can emotionally handle reading it again so quickly, so I shelved that one, and I ended up going with this one over here, which is called Empathy. So Empathy is one that I actually had in my last haul, and it's one I picked up in a charity shop where I found quite a few lesbian-themed books, which I was quite pleased about. And I was actually dying to read all of these, so I'm glad that the Contemporary-A-Thon gave me an opportunity to read this one earlier than I probably would have thought. So Empathy is a story about the 2 main characters, a character called Doc and a character called Anna. And they are, I suppose, essentially grappling with their own lives and their decisions in life and how their decisions have brought them to where they are. They're both in their early 30s, which I love. It's not necessarily always the age range that you read a lot about. And the main character, Anna, is a lesbian, and it's really funny, on the back on the blurb it says a lesbian who's never slept with another lesbian, and I realised why. I thought that's a bit weird, but it turns out that when she is talking about her life, and she ends up talking to Doc about her life, she says that she's struggling with a lot of the relationships she's had because she also seems to always pick women that are either bi or straight, that are not necessarily lesbians or that are trying to hide their relationship. She says at one point that she's never actually been introduced to any of her partner's parents. So her relationships have been kept quite secret, and maybe she feels like they're ashamed of her and ashamed of being with her. So that's really interesting. Then also Doc, he's a psychologist. You read about his everyday life, how his home life has affected how he thinks and how he behaves. The interaction between Anna and Doc, where he's essentially her therapist and she's talking to him, that's really interesting. Another piece about this book that I really loved was the setting. So again, the late 80s, early 90s, you had a lot of reference to the AIDS epidemic. A lot of Anna's friends are dying, which obviously is not a happy, cheerful thing, but it's a reality, and I think it's good that it's expressed in fiction and it's handled in a very realistic way in this book as well. I also found the way that it was written very good. I've never read any Sarah Schulman, so actually she could have been one of my authors, new to me authors as well, for one of the other challenges, but I'm definitely going to look up some more books of hers. I love the way she writes. It's also interesting, again, this I only realised this after I'd read it, it also has a bit of a non-traditional format. So if you look at that there, it's like a script. So what this is that Doc is asking Anna to tell him about her family life, and it's set out almost like a script, and you get sort of stage directions of what's happening. So that was really interesting. I really, really rate this book. I really enjoyed it. I think actually I'm going to read it again. And for me, it was a 4-star read. Like I said, definitely going to pick up some more of Sarah Schulman's work. So I was really happy with this. So I'm really glad that the Contemporary-A-Thon made me read it early. The next challenge. The next one was to read a dark or spooky contemporary. Now, my TBR for the month was kind of spooky heavy anyway, because I'm so looking forward to Halloween. I love Halloween, and obviously October next month, so I was getting myself in the mood. But I didn't think that a lot of these really fitted the contemporary vibe. I'm not entirely sure. A lot of the ones I picked were more on the supernatural vibe, I thought. So I thought I'd pick another book and go with the more dark theme. And this has been on my TBR for quite a while, and it's called The Truth and Lies of Ella Black. That's reflecting. But it's a really nice cover, this. So I thought this kind of went with the dark theme. So first of all, The Truth and Lies, and then at the bottom of this cover, you can see Ella Black has crossed out, and it says 40 days until she dies, which definitely suits the kind of dark theme. And then also the premise sounded really interesting of this, and I'm not giving away the story, but the premise actually tells you on the back, is that she seems to be an ordinary, normal 17-year-old, couple of weeks before her 18th birthday, very suburban English life, but she has another voice in her head, and she calls this part of her Bella, and this voice is very dark and somewhat evil and somewhat violent. And I thought that was a really interesting premise. And then the other premise that I thought was really interesting was that early on in the book, she is at school, it's an ordinary day. Her parents come in to her school and make her go down to the principal's office and whisk her away onto a plane to go to Rio, in Brazil. And she doesn't know why. This wasn't a planned family vacation. It turns out she's always wanted to go to Brazil, but there's no real apparent good reason why her parents have suddenly yanked her out of school and decided to go on this family vacation out of the blue. They've barely packed anything. It's all very mysterious and very weird. So the setup was really, really good. And I've actually read Emily Barr before, and I read Backpacker by her, which I really, really liked. So my expectations were quite high. Were they met? No. I'm really sort of sad to say that. Like I said, the whole premise of having this kind of split personality, and again, this could have fallen into one of the other challenges, was the diversity challenge, to read a novel that had diversity in it. So that was really interesting. Her best friend, one of her best friends, is gay guy, so again, the diversity aspect was cool. The kind of thriller aspect of why on earth would your parents do this? Why would they just take you out of school and chuck you on a plane and you don't know why and not tell you? So that was very mysterious. I will say, have an idea of why, and it turned out that was loosely the reason why. So maybe that was a bit of a letdown, because I kind of guessed what they were hiding from her. I also thought just the execution of those ideas and the exploration of that voice in her head and the exploration of her character, it just didn't live up to what I was expecting. And then it did the thing I hate the most in books, and this is why I don't read a lot of, straight up romance. Actually, it's probably why I don't read that much contemporary. Drives me crazy. Insta love. It was like I saw this guy across a crowded breakfast room and our eyes met and I was in love. Lust, yes, maybe, you see a handsome stranger, you're in lust, you're not in love. You go on one date and suddenly this is the love of your life, and you're both doing things that would imply that somebody was the love of your life. But this is somebody you've just met, pretty much nothing about, and it turns out he certainly doesn't know a lot about her. And they're in love, and it's all great and it's wonderful. No, I hate that. It drives me crazy. So a part of me, when this happened, was, oh, I don't like this. But the other part of me went, oh, maybe it's a twist, maybe it's part of the reason why she's here in Brazil. Maybe this whole instant connection thing, there's going to be more to this. Spoiler, there isn't. They are just simply in insta love. And I hate that. I hate it. So that really kind of ruined part of the book for me. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. It's not terrible. I'm sure, I read it to the end, I'm sure people would enjoy it. I did want to know what happens, to be fair, so I did kind of stick through it, and I read it quite quickly, and it was entertaining. It wasn't terrible, but yeah, there were the bits of it that just sort of let me down. So I ended up giving it a 3 star. 3 star for me, just kind of an idea of my rating system, is I liked it. Oh, it was a bit meh, it was alright. I didn't hate it. If I'm going down to 1 or 2 stars, it means I really don't like it. And it's not that if it was just the romance, it would be a 2 star, maybe even 1.5. But the fact that, it was quite interesting in points, and the idea of this other voice in her head, and the fact that I did actually read to the end and want to know what happened in the story, or how, Emily Barr decided to end it, pushes it up to a 3 for me. But yeah, tiny bit of a letdown. So anyway, moving on. So from the letdown to the no, I loved it, was the next one. So this is Read a Diverse Contemporary, and I picked one of the books that was on my TBR for the month, Disobedience by Naomi Alderman. So if you've listened to my other video, I went on and on about how much I loved The Power, and I loved The Power. So I was really looking forward to reading this other book by Naomi, because The Power was the first one I'd read by her. And I have to say, it didn't disappoint. I really, really enjoyed it. It's incredibly thought-provoking. Again, like I think like The Powers, but in a slightly different way. So this book is about two women who are, you would say lesbians, but actually I'm going to say bisexual, because both of them do have relationships with men. One of them's probably more of a lesbian than the other one. I guess it's a debate. You can debate this with yourself in the book, whether or not they're actually lesbians or bisexuals, or do we actually have to identify them as anything? Are we just talking about relationships? So I suppose that's a point of debate. But that was the diversity rep in the book. But the other diversity rep in this book, which I really actually enjoyed, because I've not read, I don't think I've ever really read anything about this community, was the Orthodox Jew community. And both of these women are from the Orthodox Jewish community in the United Kingdom. And I found that really interesting. I found some of the customs I had no idea about, some of the rules, and it's incredibly thought-provoking. Again, it deals with identity, it deals with culture, it deals with ideas of where do you fit in, of not feeling in the right place, of not feeling accepted, of trying to be accepted, of not trying to be accepted, of trying to go your own way, power between men and women. That's definitely an element in this book as well. So I really loved it. I would give this book solid 4, maybe 4.5 stars. I don't know, if I reread it, maybe it would go up to 5, but at the moment, 4.5. And actually this one is also the doubling up for the last challenge, which is challenge number 7, which is read a contemporary that you think is going to be a 5-star. So this was my 5-star prediction for the month. Like I said, 4.5 right now. There were a few bits and pieces where I'm kind of trying to decide whether or not. I might do more of a wrap-up in my September wrap-up and formulate my thoughts even more, because I've just finished this one. But definitely a solid 4.5 to 5 stars. So I really, really love this book, and I'd really recommend reading it. So like I said, that was for 2 challenges. Then the next challenge was read a contemporary in a non-traditional format. And this one was a bit hard for me. So I don't know if I necessarily, in my head, own any books that are in a non-traditional format. I suppose Empathy could have worked for that as well, because it has that sort of scripted piece in it, which is not necessarily traditional. But the one I actually picked was this one here. It's called The Readers of Broken Wheel Recommend. Now this one, again, I picked up in a charity shop just because I thought it sounded kind of cute. It talks about someone opening a bookstore and having these people recommend books, and I love anything that where the character opens a bookstore. It's something that I would love to do. So that was the reason why I picked up this book. And then for this challenge, I thought part of the chapter, so there's always a chapter that is just a letter. So you can see there, it's a letter from one character to the other character. And what's interesting about it is you only ever get one side of the correspondence as well. So you only ever get the letter from the character Amy, who is in the United States in Iowa, to the character Sarah, who is in Sweden. And those are essentially your 2 main characters. But what happens is that Sarah is in Sweden and she's corresponding with Amy, and Amy invites her out to this town called Broken Wheel in the States to come and see her, and they've been corresponding via recommendations and sending books back and forth, and really their shared love of reading and books, which is, I love that made me kind of geek out and be all nerdy. And you know, there's a piece in the book where she's in Amy's house and she walks into her bedroom and there's just walls covered with thousands of books, and I was just like, it's my dream. So I love that element of the book. And actually what happens, I should probably take a little bit of a step back, what happens in the beginning of the book is that Sarah, a character from Sweden, gets to Iowa, and it turns out that Amy's dead. So she kind of grapples with the idea of, should she go straight back, should she stay? But the town kind of embraces her and lets her stay in Amy's house. And then the events of the book kind of unfold from there. And I really like that element. Again, like I said, I loved the whole geeking out on books and the book references and the author references, loved all that. Liked the element of a foreigner being in a foreign country, this girl who is, I suppose, essentially quite mousy, quite geeky, spends her time living in books. And she has this adventure, and she goes off to the States and she kind of finds herself a little bit, and she, you know, I thought that was really cute. Again, the thing I didn't like about this book was the kind of insta-love. Again, there's this guy and she sees him, and actually he's quite mean to her in the beginning and she falls for him. And I'm not entirely sure why she falls for him. So again, that was something that I didn't really like, and subsequently, the way the town, because the town kind of embraces and falls in love with her, which I thought was really sweet, and then they want to keep her, but she is on a tourist visa and she should be going back to Sweden. So the town devises a plan to keep her, and yeah, that plan is just so obvious. And I kind of wish, because it was all a little bit about empowerment and finding yourself and about these people embracing her, I sort of felt like, could we not come up with another way to keep her in this town and in the States other than what they did come up with? You can probably guess what they come up with, because, you know, there's a man involved and there's residency involved. I don't think you'll not guess. So that bit, it annoyed me. It just did, unfortunately. So I ended up giving this book, again, a 3-star, because I enjoyed it and I finished reading it and I really liked elements of it, but then there were elements of it that I wasn't that keen on. So with this book as well, I used it to double up on a challenge, and the other challenge I used to double up was a contemporary author that's new to you, and this author is, I'm going to murder the surname, Katrina Bivold. And the other non-traditional format actually element of this that I had in mind when I picked it up for this challenge was the fact that it was a translation. So it was originally published in Swedish, because this is a Swedish author, and it was translated into English, so I figured that that kind of loosely fit that theme, and it also fit the other challenge of a new to me author, because I've never read anything by Katrina before. And then the last challenge, you'll be happy to know, is read a contemporary that has your initials somewhere on the cover. So with this one, again, I kind of took the opportunity to read a book that I was dying to read. It was in my last haul, and I actually struggled to find, I have a load of books on my TBR, I have probably close to 100 books on my TBR, and I struggled to find a book that had a J and a G on it, which are my initials, but that was also the contemporary, I guess, because I have a lot of kind of fantasy and dystopian and horror and other books. So I went with this one, Ruby Fruit Jungle. Oh, I love this book. So Ruby Fruit Jungle is one of the books that's been recommended to me over and over again as a lesbian classic. Kind of a must-read, Rita Mae Brown. This is a kind of a classic lesbian read. So I was, like I said, absolutely dying to read it, and it didn't disappoint. And again, this could have really been fit the bill for the 5-star prediction, and also kind of orange, because it has red and yellow, and I suppose in those bits it's kind of orange. You mix those two colours, you get orange. So this was another one I had high hopes for. It didn't disappoint. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to read it again, because I think I want to formulate some more of my ideas on it and more of my impressions on it. It's basically about, I suppose what a lot of contemporaries are about is a period in the life of our main character. So our main character is Molly, and she is kind of finding her way through life, again grappling with relationships, finding her own way through life. And at the back here it says Molly is a girl who refuses to be put in a box, and I think that's a really, really great description actually of her. She has her own set of values, her own ideals. She wants to make her own way through life, and I loved all that, and I loved that element of it. And it's her dealing with her different relationships, different girlfriends, boyfriends. The one thing that I did find quite funny was that she seems to just be a chick magnet. Like, she reminds me of Shane from The L Word. If any of you watched The L Word, love Shane. I get why she's a chick magnet. But this character also seems to be, she kind of almost says it herself. It's like, women just flock to me, which I'm not sure how I felt about that, but okay, fair enough if that's true. Yeah, I love it. It's all about relationships really, and about finding yourself and who you are, and finding yourself amongst the different relationships you have in your life. So I really enjoyed it. Again, solid 4 stars for me, this one. Really liked it, did not disappoint, and I was really glad that the Contemporary-A-Thon actually gave me a reason to read it early, because next month's books are pretty much all going to be, well, unless something else shakes the tree and falls in and I particularly want to read it, but they're all going to be kind of horror and, again, spooky, dark themed books. So I didn't think I was going to get an opportunity to read it as soon as I did, and I'm really happy that I did. that's it. That was my Contemporary-A-Thon wrap up. I'm going to do another September wrap up pretty soon because I've gotten through most of the books that I was going to get through on my TBR. There's a couple left to go. And then it'll be October. I can't wait for the spookiness that is October. Like I said, I've already got bats up. I'm already kind of prepping for all of that. I've even got my autumnal colours on today. So I thought, you know, I realised it's leopard print, but it's kind of, it makes me feel all cozy and autumnal because it's really quite cold in Britain today. What the hell is going on? So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you soon with my next video. Bye everybody.